The emergency signals came from every corner of the harvest worlds at the same time. The peaceful farming planets that fed half the galaxy had gone silent in a matter of hours. When the first rescue ships arrived, they found scenes that would haunt the galaxy for centuries. Captain Threx of the Galactic patrol ship Mercy's Light had seen war before. He had witnessed battles, accidents, and natural disasters across dozens of worlds. But nothing had prepared him for what he found on Verdani Prime. The blue-green world that once grew food for billions now looked like a burned wasteland. The cities were nothing but ash and melted metal. The farms were fields of black dirt mixed with bones. The Verdani people were gone. All of them. Men, women, children, elderly. Over 3 billion souls had been murdered in ways too horrible to describe. The evidence was everywhere. Torture chambers in what used to be schools. Mass graves filled with families. Recording devices left behind to show the galaxy what had happened. The Crimson Syndicate had done this. The militant faction of the Sector race had swept through the harvest worlds like a plague of death. They had not come to conquer or steal resources. They had come to kill for pleasure. The recordings they left behind showed Sector soldiers laughing as they burned Verdani children alive. They showed experiments on pregnant mothers. They showed games where Verdani were hunted through their own cities for sport. Captain Thrax sent his report to the Galactic Council with shaking hands. Similar reports came from the other 5 harvest worlds. 12 billion Verdani dead. An entire peaceful species wiped out in 3 days. The galaxy had never seen anything like it. The emergency session of the Galactic Council took place on Centrum, the political heart of civilized space. Representatives from over 200 species gathered in the great circular chamber. The mood was dark, but most believed this could be handled through normal diplomatic channels. Wars had been fought before. Peace had always been made afterward. Ambassador Zethka of the Altruian Empire spoke first. His tall, graceful form moved to the center of the chamber. "This tragedy shocks us all," he said in his musical voice. "But we must not let emotion drive us to more violence. The Crimson Syndicate must be brought to justice, yes, but through proper diplomatic channels. We must open negotiations immediately." Murmurs of agreement filled the chamber. Chancellor Vix of the Trade Federation stood next. Her blue skin shimmered as she spoke. "The Altruians speak wisdom. Economic sanctions will hurt the Sector worlds badly. Combined with trade blockades and reparation demands, we can force them to surrender their war criminals for trial. Violence only creates more violence." Even Grimax, the scarred elder chief of the Drax warrior clans, surprised many with his measured response. "The Drax have no love for murderers," he growled. "But we cannot risk full-scale war. Limited military strikes followed by peace talks. Make them hurt, then make them surrender." The chamber buzzed with discussions about committee formations, diplomatic protocols, and negotiation strategies. This was how the galaxy had always solved its problems. Talk, compromise, find middle ground. Even the worst conflicts eventually ended at a negotiating table. Then they asked humanity for their position. Ambassador Sarah Chun rose from her seat in the human section. She was a small woman compared to most species in the chamber, but something in her bearing made the entire room fall quiet. She walked to the center of the chamber, her footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. She did not speak for a long moment, looking around at the representatives of the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm but carried a weight that made everyone lean forward. "The Terran Republic has reviewed the evidence from the harvest worlds," she said. "We have seen the recordings. We have counted the dead. We have witnessed what the Crimson Syndicate did to an entire peaceful species." She paused, and her next words would be remembered by every being in that chamber for the rest of their lives. The Terran Republic does not negotiate with genocidal murderers. We will act accordingly. The chamber erupted. Representatives jumped to their feet, shouting questions and demands. How could humanity refuse to negotiate? What did they mean by act accordingly? This was not how civilized species handled conflict. Ambassador Zethka raised his voice above the chaos. Ambassador Chun, surely you do not mean to suggest that Earth would act unilaterally? The Galactic Council has procedures for these situations. Sarah Chun looked at him with eyes that seemed older than her years. Ambassador Zethka, your people have a saying about compromise being the heart of civilization. Humanity learned something different from our history. Some acts are so evil that compromise with their perpetrators makes you complicit in their evil. Chancellor Vick stood again, her voice urgent. But without negotiation, where does it end? How many will die in the war you are suggesting? The war has already been fought, Chun replied. 12 billion Verdani died in it. The only question now is whether their murderers face justice or whether the galaxy teaches them that murder pays if you kill enough innocents. Elder Chief Grimax leaned forward. What exactly are you saying, human? Sarah Chun turned to face the entire assembly. I am saying that in 72 hours, every member of the Crimson Syndicate will surrender unconditionally for trial, or they will be destroyed. This is not a negotiation. This is not a diplomatic position. This is a statement of fact. The chamber fell silent again. In 3 centuries of galactic history, no species had ever refused to negotiate. The very foundation of galactic civilization was built on the idea that everything could be discussed, bargained over, compromised on. You cannot be serious, whispered Chancellor Vix. Deadly serious, Chun replied. She looked around the chamber one more time. The Terran Republic withdraws from all diplomatic discussions regarding the Crimson Syndicate. We will handle this matter ourselves. She turned and walked out of the chamber, followed by the rest of the human delegation. For the first time in galactic history, a species had walked away from the negotiating table before talks had even begun. The representatives sat in stunned silence long after the humans had left. They had no idea that everything was about to change. The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with confused activity for 3 days after the humans walked out. Committee after committee formed to discuss proper responses to the Harvest World's massacre. Subcommittees formed to study the committees. Working groups debated the formation of study groups while they talked. Humanity moved. Admiral Marcus Hayes stood on the bridge of the Terran battleship Retribution, watching his fleet assemble in the dark space between stars. 57 ships had answered the call. Destroyers, cruisers, battleships, and support vessels from every corner of human space. More were coming. The Admiral was an old man by human standards, with gray hair and scars from the border wars 20 years ago. He had fought pirates, rebels, and alien raiders. But this was different. This was personal for every human in the fleet. Admiral, his communications officer, called out. All ships report ready. Hayes nodded. Open a channel. All frequencies. I want every listening post in the galaxy to hear this. The channel opened. Across hundreds of light years, every ship, station, and settlement with a radio would receive the message. Hayes spoke in a calm, clear voice that carried the weight of his entire species. This is Admiral Marcus Hayes of the Terran Republic Fleet. We are broadcasting on all frequencies to deliver a message to the Crimson Syndicate and any who harbor them. You have committed genocide against the Verdani people. 12 billion innocent beings died by your hands. The Terran Republic does not recognize any authority that protects genocidal murderers. He paused, letting his words sink in across the galaxy. Therefore, All members of the Crimson Syndicate will surrender immediately for trial by Verdani survivors. Any government, organization, or individual who aids, harbors, or protects Syndicate members will be considered accomplices to genocide. This is not a negotiation. This is not a diplomatic proposal. This is a statement of fact. The message ended. Within hours, it had been repeated on every news network in the galaxy. The reaction was immediate and shocked. On Alturia Prime, Ambassador Zethka called an emergency meeting with his government. The humans have lost their minds, he told the High Council. They cannot seriously believe they can take on the entire Sector Empire alone. But on Earth, humanity was not alone. Reports came in from human colonies across the galaxy. Every single human world had voted to support the action. Factory worlds began producing ammunition and supplies. Agricultural worlds sent food. Mining worlds shipped raw materials. 300 million humans spread across dozens of systems were united in a way the galaxy had never seen. The human fleets began to move, not toward sector space, but toward the trade routes that connected Syndicate worlds to the rest of the galaxy. Admiral Hayes had learned his lessons from human history. You did not need to invade an enemy if you could cut off their supplies. On the trade station Deep Port, Captain Keller of the human merchant ship New Horizon received new orders. His cargo holds were full of medical supplies bound for sector space. The orders were simple. Dump the cargo in space and return to human space immediately. But sir, his first officer protested. We have a contract. The Trade Federation will fine us millions of credits. Captain Keller looked at the images from the harvest worlds that every human ship had received. Some things are more important than money, he said quietly. Across the galaxy, human ships began withdrawing from all trade with sector space. Human banks froze all Syndicate assets. Human companies canceled all contracts. Human diplomats delivered the same message to every government. Choose. Stand with murderers or stand aside. The Ulturian Empire tried to maintain neutrality. Their ambassador to Earth requested a meeting with the human leadership. He was politely told that Earth was no longer conducting diplomatic meetings with any government that maintained relations with the Crimson Syndicate. Chancellor Vix of the Trade Federation called Ambassador Chun directly. Sarah, you must be reasonable. The economic damage from this blockade will hurt innocent civilians. Chun's response was broadcast live to every human world. Chancellor, when the Crimson Syndicate was murdering Verdani children, where were your economic concerns? When they were burning entire cities for entertainment, where were your humanitarian principles? Do not lecture humanity about harming innocents when you want to protect the species that butchered 12 billion peaceful farmers. The call ended. Within an hour, the Trade Federation lost every human customer and supplier. Their economy, which depended heavily on human trade, began to collapse. On the Drax homeworld, Elder Chief Grimax watched human ships take position around sector trade routes. His military advisors were confused. They are not attacking, General Thok reported. They are just waiting. Grimax understood. They are showing the Syndicate that they cannot hide. Every sector ship that leaves their space must face human vessels. Every supply convoy must run human blockades. The humans are not fighting a war. They are delivering a message. That message became clear when the first sector transport tried to break through the human lines. The transport was carrying food and medicine to a Syndicate colony. When it refused to turn back, the human cruiser Steadfast disabled its engines with precise weapons fire. The transport crew was given a choice: surrender the cargo for inspection or be destroyed. When they surrendered, the humans found weapons hidden among the medical supplies. The transport crew was arrested as accomplices to genocide. The weapons were destroyed. The actual medical supplies were sent to refugee camps housing survivors from other worlds. The Syndicate had attacked. Within a week, every trade route to Syndicate space was blocked. No supplies got through. No messages got out. The Crimson Syndicate was cut off from the galaxy like a diseased limb. On Centrum, the Galactic Council finally passed a resolution calling for immediate diplomatic negotiations with all parties. The human response arrived an hour later. It was a single sentence. The Terran Republic does not negotiate with genocidal murderers or their enablers. Ambassador Zethka tried one more time to reason with humanity. He sent a personal message to Ambassador Chun. Sarah, your people cannot seriously believe you can defeat an entire galactic empire through blockade alone. Her response shocked him. Ambassador, we do not need to defeat them. We just need to make it clear that genocide has consequences. The choice of what those consequences will be belongs to the Syndicate and their supporters. As the days passed, that choice became clearer. The Syndicate could surrender for trial, or they could watch their empire slowly starve while surrounded by silent, waiting human ships. The galaxy was learning that humanity did not make empty threats. Warlord Kreshtak laughed when he heard humanity's ultimatum. The massive sector stood in his command center on the fortress world of Bloodfang, surrounded by the trophies of his victories. Skulls from dozens of species lined the walls. Weapons from conquered worlds hung like decorations. The preserved skins of enemies were stretched across frames. Humans, he hissed, his forked tongue tasting the air with amusement. They control what, 30 systems? 40? I rule over 400 worlds. My fleets could crush their pathetic navy in days. His lieutenant, War Chief Veximer, shifted nervously. My lord, intelligence reports suggest they have blocked all our trade routes. Our supply lines are temporarily inconvenienced, Kreshtak snarled. When I'm done with these mammals, their worlds will burn just like the Verdani farms. Perhaps I will keep some of their young as pets. To show his contempt for the human threats, Kreshtak ordered a special broadcast sent throughout the galaxy. The recording showed him in his trophy room, holding the preserved head of a Verdani child. He spoke directly to the camera, his yellow eyes gleaming with cruelty. Humans of Terra, he said, his voice dripping with mockery. You demand that I surrender for trial? You threaten me with your tiny ships and your pathetic navy? Let me show you what I think of your threats. The recording switched to footage from the Harvest Worlds. Scenes of Verdani families being tortured for entertainment. Videos of Sectar soldiers making games from the murder of civilians. Images of children being used as target practice. This is what your justice failed to prevent, Kreshtak continued. This is what your negotiations could not stop. The weak exist only to serve the strong. The Verdani served their purpose as entertainment. Now they are gone, and the galaxy's better for it. The broadcast ended with Kreshtak crushing the Verdani, child's skull in his bare claws. The recording was played on every news network in the galaxy. Most species were horrified. The Trade Federation condemned it as barbaric propaganda. The Altarian Empire called it deeply unfortunate, but not grounds for war. Humanity said nothing, but things began to happen. The first sign was on the outer edge of Syndicate space. A human stealth ship appeared next to a Sectar patrol vessel. It did not attack. It did not communicate. It simply appeared, following the patrol ship for 3 hours before vanishing again. Then it happened again. And again. Human ships began materializing throughout Syndicate space. Always silent. Always watching. Never attacking first. But always there. Captain Ziegter of the Sectar destroyer Bloodclaw was the first to fire on one of the human watchers. His plasma cannon struck the human frigate Deadeye at point-blank range. The human ship's shields absorbed the attack without even flickering. The return fire lasted exactly 12 seconds. When it ended, Bloodclaw was drifting in space, its engines destroyed and life support failing. The human ship moved alongside and broadcast a simple message: surrender for trial or die. Captain Zichter chose to fight. His ship exploded 3 minutes later. The human ship collected the escape pods and delivered them to the nearest Verdani refugee camp with a note: justice will be served. Word of the encounter spread through the Syndicate fleet. Human ships were not the primitive vessels they had expected. Human technology was advanced, their weapons were devastating, and their pilots seemed to know every weakness in Sector ship design. More encounters followed. Every time a Syndicate ship attacked a human vessel, the same thing happened. The Sector ship would be disabled quickly and efficiently. Any survivors would be captured and delivered to Verdani survivors for trial. The ships themselves would be destroyed. The Silent Watchers multiplied. Every Syndicate world found human ships in their space. They hung in orbit like mechanical vultures, never attacking civilian targets, but making their presence impossible to ignore. They could not be bribed, reasoned with, or frightened away. War Chief Veximer brought Warlord Kreshtak increasingly desperate reports. "My lord, we have lost 17 patrol ships this week. The humans are everywhere. They know our patrol routes, our supply schedules, our defense positions." Kreshtak's yellow eyes narrowed. "Then we will show them the price of defying us. Bring me my nephew. We will send these mammals a message they cannot ignore." Prince Sekvul was young for a Sector noble, barely 50 years old. He was also Kreshtak's heir and one of the architects of the Harvest World's massacre. When the situation became desperate, Kreshtak gave him a simple mission: escape to neutral space with enough stolen wealth to hire mercenary armies. Prince Sekvul's ship, the Golden Talon, was fast and well armed. It carried the treasures of a dozen conquered worlds and the personal fortune of the Crimson Syndicate's royal family. If he could reach Trade Federation space, he could buy protection from the humans. The Golden Talon never made it past the first human blockade. The human frigate Wolfsbane intercepted the prince's ship at the edge of Syndicate space. There was no dramatic chase, no extended battle. The human ship simply appeared in front of Golden Talon and transmitted a single message: cut engines and prepare to be boarded. Prince Sekvul chose to fight. His ship was larger, newer, and carried more weapons than the human frigate. The battle lasted 4 minutes and 18 seconds. When it ended, Golden Talon was dead in space. The human boarding pods cut through the Sector ship's hull like it was made of paper. The human marines inside moved through the ship with terrifying efficiency. They knew exactly where to find every crew member, every weapon cache, every piece of stolen treasure. Prince Sekvul and his crew were captured alive. The stolen wealth was catalogued and prepared for return to its rightful owners. The recordings of Syndicate crimes found on the ship were copied and sent to every news network in the galaxy. But the humans did something that shocked the galaxy even more than their military efficiency. They delivered Prince Sekvul and his crew to a group of Verdani survivors. Not to a government court, not to Galactic Council custody. To the people whose families the prince had personally murdered. The trial was broadcast live. The prince was forced to watch recordings of his own crimes. The families of his victims were allowed to question him. When he tried to claim he was following orders, a Verdani mother whose children he had tortured asked him a simple question: "Did anyone order you to smile while you killed my daughter?" Prince Sekvul was executed by Verdani justice. His ship was returned to Syndicate space empty, except for a single note: "We know where every one of you sleeps." That night, every high-ranking Syndicate officer found the same message waiting for them in their private quarters. The messages had been placed there despite the best security in the galaxy. despite locked doors, armed guards, and electronic defenses. The humans had walked into their homes and left calling cards like phantoms. Warlord Kreshtak found his message carved into the headboard of his own bed. For the first time in his violent life, the master of the Crimson Syndicate felt something he had never experienced before: fear. The Galactic Council had never faced a crisis like this. For 300 years, every conflict had been solved through negotiation, compromise, and careful diplomatic language. Now humanity had forced every species in the galaxy to choose sides, and the comfortable middle ground was disappearing fast. Ambassador Zethka stood before the emergency session, his usually calm demeanor cracking under the pressure. "The humans have gone too far," he declared to the assembled representatives. "They are holding the entire galaxy hostage with their extremist position. This is terrorism, not justice." Murmurs of agreement came from the traditional powers. The Altarian Empire, the Trade Federation, and dozens of smaller species all nodded along. They had built their civilizations on the idea that everything could be negotiated, that every problem had a diplomatic solution. "The Crimson Syndicate has agreed to enter peace talks," Zethka continued. "They will discuss reparations, territorial concessions, and the trial of some mid-level commanders. This is how civilized species handle conflict." Chancellor Vix of the Trade Federation stood to support him. "Ambassador Zethka speaks wisdom. The Syndicate has suffered enough losses. They are ready to make reasonable concessions. We must not let human fanaticism prevent a peaceful resolution." The vote was close, but it passed. The Galactic Council officially opened peace negotiations with the Crimson Syndicate. The terms were generous: war crime trials for lower-ranking officers, economic reparations to be paid over 50 years, and cultural education programs to prevent future conflicts. Warlord Kreshtak, desperate to escape the human blockade, agreed to the terms. He would sacrifice some of his subordinates and pay some money. In exchange, the galaxy would protect him from human justice. It was, he thought, a fair trade. The human response was swift and absolute. Within 6 hours of the vote, every human diplomat on every world throughout the galaxy received the same order: return to human space immediately. Every human trade ship canceled its contracts and headed home. Every human bank froze all assets of any government that participated in the peace talks. The message from Ambassador Chen was brief and broadcast to every world. The Terran Republic does not negotiate with genocidal murderers or those who protect them. All species that participate in these peace talks will be considered accomplices to genocide. Choose carefully. The withdrawal was devastating. Humanity controlled only a small portion of galactic space, but they were involved in trade, technology, and finance far beyond their size. Human-made computer systems ran the economies of dozens of worlds. Human medical technology saved millions of lives each year. Human agricultural methods fed populations across the galaxy. When the humans withdrew, those systems began to fail. The first crack in the diplomatic alliance came from an unexpected source. Elder Chief Grimax of the Drax warrior clans had initially supported limited military action followed by negotiations. But as he watched the humans operate, something changed in his thinking. Grimax was old, even by Drax standards. He had fought in dozens of wars and had always believed that honor could be found in battle, followed by respect for defeated enemies. But the recordings from the Harvest Worlds showed something that was not war. It was murder for entertainment. He called a meeting of the Drax High Command. His scarred face was grim as he spoke to his generals. "I have watched the humans fight. They do not seek conquest. They do not want territory or tribute. They want justice for the murdered. This is not fanaticism. This is honor." General Thok, his old friend and advisor, looked confused. "But Chief, we voted to support the peace talks." Our word has been given. Grymax stood slowly, his ancient joints creaking. Our word was given to protect murderers. That is not honor. That is cowardice disguised as wisdom. He looked around at his commanders. The Dracs have forgotten what it means to face true evil. The humans remember. The next day, Elder Chief Grymax sent a message to Admiral Hayes. The Drax clans have reconsidered our position. You fight as we should have fought. Honor demands justice, not compromise with murderers. Drax stands with Terra. The Drax withdrawal from the peace talks sent shockwaves through the galaxy. If the warrior clans were abandoning diplomacy, what did that say about the negotiations? More cracks appeared. The Zephyrian Republic, a small but influential species known for their philosophers, issued a statement that stunned many. We have studied the human position and find it morally superior to our own. How can we speak of justice while protecting those who commit genocide? The Zephyrians withdraw from these talks. One by one, smaller species began to follow. The peaceful heron, the aquatic tide dancers, the crystalline prism folk all announced their support for the human position. They were tired of compromising with evil in the name of diplomacy. But it was the scandal that brought down Chancellor Vix that truly changed everything. Human intelligence. Services had been busy during the peace talks. While diplomats debated in comfortable chambers, human agents had been gathering evidence. What they found was shocking, even by galactic standards. The evidence showed that trade, Federation corporations had been selling weapons to the Crimson Syndicate during the Harvest Worlds massacre. Medical supplies marked for humanitarian aid had been diverted to Syndicate torture chambers. Food meant for refugees had been sent to feed the armies that committed genocide. The recordings were leaked to every news network simultaneously. They showed Chancellor Vix herself authorizing the sales, saying the words that would destroy her career. The Syndicate pays well, and dead aliens can't file complaints about quality. The Trade Federation government collapsed within hours. Riots broke out on dozens of worlds as citizens realized their leaders had profited from genocide. Chancellor Vix tried to claim the recordings were fake, but the Human Intelligence Services had provided too much proof. Her replacement? Chancellor Bex made his first official act the withdrawal from peace talks with the Syndicate. The Trade Federation will no longer participate in negotiations with genocidal murderers or their enablers. The Altarian Empire found itself increasingly isolated. Ambassador Zethka tried to maintain the peace talks with just a handful of remaining species, but even his own people were losing faith. Protests erupted on Alturia Prime as citizens demanded to know why their government was protecting mass murderers. The final blow came when Human Intelligence released one more piece of evidence. It showed Warlord Kreshtak in a private meeting with Altarian diplomats, laughing about the peace talks. "These fools will protect me from human justice," he said. "All I have to do is promise to try some of my subordinates and pay some money. Then I can plan my next conquest." The recording ended with Kreshtak making crude jokes about which species he would target next. The Altarians themselves were on his list. Ambassador Zethka watched his career end as his own government recalled him from the peace talks. The Altarian High Council issued a formal apology to the human government and announced their withdrawal from negotiations with the Syndicate. For the first time in galactic history, the diplomatic solution had failed completely. Not because of military defeat or economic collapse, but because one species had forced the galaxy to confront a simple, moral truth. Some acts are too evil to forgive. The peace talks were over. The Crimson Syndicate stood alone, surrounded by human fleets and abandoned by every ally they had tried to buy with promises of compromise. Warlord Kreshtak realized that he had underestimated humanity in the worst possible way. They had not just defeated his military forces. They had defeated the entire system of galactic politics that he had counted on to save him. Now there was nowhere left to run. The siege of Syndicate space had lasted 3 months when the end finally came. But it did not come as the galaxy expected. There were no massive space battles, no desperate last stands, no glorious charges into enemy fire. The Crimson Syndicate died slowly, strangled by its own people. Admiral Hayes stood on the bridge of retribution, watching the tactical display that showed Syndicate space. Red dots marked worlds still under Syndicate control. Blue dots showed human fleet positions. The blue dots formed a perfect cage around the red ones, and that cage was slowly growing smaller. "Report," Hayes ordered his intelligence chief. Commander Park looked up from her console. "Civil disorder on 12 Syndicate worlds, sir. Food riots on 8 more. The Syndicate military is fragmenting. 3 admirals have already contacted us about surrender terms." Hayes nodded. This was how it always ended when you fought smart, instead of just fighting hard. The Syndicate had thought they could outlast a human blockade. They had not understood that humans had learned their lessons from centuries of war. You did not need to invade an empire, to destroy it. You just needed to make its people understand that their leaders were the reason they were suffering. First major defection came from Admiral Vector of the Syndicate Third Fleet. He was a career military officer who joined the Syndicate for advancement, not because he enjoyed murder. When his own supply lines were cut and his crews began to starve, he made a choice. His message to Admiral Hayes was simple: "I surrender my fleet for trial. I ask only that you judge us by our individual actions, not our allegiance." Hayes reviewed Vector's record. The Sector had never participated in the Harvest World's massacre. His fleet had been on the far side of Syndicate space during the genocide. When the trials began, he would face charges for supporting the Syndicate government, but not for war crimes. The human response surprised Vector. Surrender accepted. Report to Verdani space for trial. You will be judged fairly based on evidence, not assumption. When Vector's ships arrived at the designated coordinates, they found human vessels waiting with medical supplies and food for the starving crews. The humans treated the surrendering Sector as prisoners of war, not criminals. This news spread quickly through the remaining Syndicate forces. More defections followed. Entire sectors of the Syndicate military began surrendering rather than starving with their leaders. The humans kept their word. Those who had committed war crimes faced trial and execution. But those who had simply served in the wrong army were treated fairly. Warlord Kreshtak watched his empire crumble from his fortress on Bloodfang. His advisors brought increasingly desperate reports. Half his fleet had surrendered. Most of his civilian government had fled. Entire worlds were declaring independence rather than face continued blockade. "We still have the orbital defense platforms," War Chief Veximer pointed out. "We can make the humans pay dearly if they try to assault the core worlds." Kreshtak's laugh was bitter. "And then what? We rule over ash and bones while the galaxy cheers our destruction. No, old friend. The humans have defeated us without firing a shot at our worlds. They have turned our own people against us." It was then that Kreshtak made his final, desperate gamble. He activated the galaxy-wide communication system and broadcast one last message to humanity. The recording showed him in his throne room, surrounded by the trophies of his conquests. In his claws, he held a device that every species in the galaxy recognized with horror: a planet-killer bomb. "Humans of Terra," he hissed into the camera, "you have won your little game. My empire is broken, my allies have abandoned me, and my people have turned against me. But I will not die alone." The camera panned to show a dozen similar devices arrayed around his throne room. "I have placed planet killers on every remaining world under my control. 30 billion civilians on 17 worlds. If any human ship approaches our space, if any of my remaining subordinates face your justice, I will detonate every bomb. 30 billion innocents will die, and their blood will be on your hands." The recording ended with Kreshtak's yellow eyes glaring into the camera with pure hatred. The galaxy held its breath. This was the moment that would test humanity's resolve. Were they willing to let 30 billion innocents die rather than negotiate with a genocidal madman? Admiral Hayes called a conference with his senior staff. The discussion was brief. "Sir," his chief of staff said, "we could attempt a simultaneous strike on all bomb locations." "Our intelligence suggests—" "No," Hayes cut him off. "Too risky. If even one bomb detonates, billions die. Then we negotiate?" Ask Commander Park. Hayes looked at the tactical display showing Syndicate space. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of 3 centuries of human history. "No. We send Warlord Kreshtak a message he will understand." The human response was broadcast on every frequency in the galaxy. Admiral Hayes himself delivered it, his face calm and resolute. "Warlord Kreshtak, you have threatened to murder 30 billion innocent civilians to protect yourself from justice. This confirms everything we have said about your character. You are not a warrior. You are not a leader. You are a coward and a murderer who hides behind the innocent." Hayes paused, and his next words became legendary across the galaxy. "If you harm one innocent life, there will be no corner of space where you can hide. No species will shelter you. No plea will save you. We will find you. We will find everyone who helped you. And when we do, the justice that follows will make the harvest worlds look like a mercy." The message continued, "But we offer one alternative. Your own people will judge you. They know what you have done. They know what you threaten to do now. Let them choose your fate." The broadcast ended. Within hours, something unexpected began to happen across Syndicate space. The Sector people themselves began to rise up on world after world. Syndicate civilians stormed government buildings. They were not rebelling for freedom or democracy. They were rebelling against leaders who would murder billions of innocents to save their own lives. Even among the Sector, there were lines that could not be crossed. The revolution reached Bloodfang within days. Kreshtak's own guards, faced with the choice between protecting a monster or saving innocent lives, made their decision. They turned him over to the human fleet. The trials began on Verdani Prime, on the burned ground where billions had died. There were no speeches about mercy or rehabilitation. No debates about proper legal procedures. The evidence was presented. The survivors gave their testimony, and justice was delivered. Kreshtak died as he had lived, as a coward, begging for a mercy he had never shown to others. But the real victory came afterward. The surviving Sector worlds, freed from Syndicate rule, asked to join the Galactic community as peaceful members. The humans helped them rebuild their government based on justice rather than strength. Ambassador Sarah Chen returned to the Galactic Council for one final speech. The chamber was packed with representatives from every species in the galaxy. They listened in respectful silence as she spoke. "The Terran Republic returns to normal diplomatic relations," she announced. "We will trade, negotiate, and cooperate as we always have. But we want to be absolutely clear about one thing. We will never again pretend that some acts deserve negotiation rather than consequences." She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of every representative. The galaxy has learned what justice looks like when it is not corrupted by politics or compromise. We hope you have learned from our example. The next time innocents cry out for help, we hope they will not cry alone. The applause that followed lasted for 10 minutes. When it ended, the galaxy was a different place. Not because humanity had conquered it, but because humanity had reminded it what moral courage looked like. The Harvest Worlds massacre was the last genocide in galactic history, not because evil had disappeared, but because the galaxy had learned that evil unopposed becomes evil empowered. Humanity had taught them all that some lines should never be crossed, and that some crimes should never be forgiven.